Take a look at 28-year-old Harrison Marshall's tiny home that he has made out of a dumpster. This to me is a tiny home, but this guy in England decided to make a whole tiny home out of a dumpster just like this. He came up with this by thinking of ways that he could find the most affordable home in London. And we're going to be taking a closer look at that. But it looks awesome. You got to check it out. There's going to be some other people in their tiny homes that I want to focus on as well, because a lot of them did them just like this. And you might remember this from a previous video. I've shown this before. So let's take a look at what these people have done. And you can tell me at the end, do you really think that tiny homes made out of dumpsters are going to be the solution to the affordability crisis, or we could do something a little better? I'm just going to throw my 2 cents. I think we can do a lot better than that. I'm going to pre-warn you ahead of time. It doesn't have a toilet inside there. It has no running water, and it only has a hot plate to cook in. It's a solution to a problem that he had faced when he was trying to find an affordable place to live right there in London. So he came up with this plan to live in a very small space that's going to cost him about $67 a month to rent. Come to find out, the actual dumpster itself, they haven't yet charged him the $67 that he was supposed to be paying. Now, the running water is actually gifted to him by somebody in the neighborhood right next door, and he only plans on living there for a brief period of time just so he can save some money. It's pretty smart, but he also had that engineering skill. I don't know if I could do it myself. You let me know if you could. No, there's some things I want to warn you about, and this is very similar to what happens with container homes too. One of the things you need to consider is what was being stored in that dumpster prior, or even in that container prior. It could have had some dangerous chemicals inside there that will be off-gassing when you're starting to live in your dumpster or a container home. And I've heard this several times from people that have gotten containers secondhand, but he's been very clever and has made it work for him. You know, here in the United States, we have a ton of permitting issues. I don't think you would get a permit to be able to put a structure like this on a busy street or in any local city. I can't even imagine this happening. But if you were looking to do something like this in your backyard, again, no matter how small the town is, you're still going to need permitting. Even though it is a very cool idea, I want you to really think about this. And I know that for many of you, if you're even possibly toying with this idea, I'm sure that you've looked at container homes too. And as cute as a lot of the container homes are, you see the price and you're like, oh, I can get a container for $6,000. To bring those up to building codes in your area is going to cost you a lot more than you anticipated. I've met with several people that have done this, and even though each one of the containers costs $6,000, you're still going to have to use the right kind of spray foam. You're still going to have to find the right kind of structuring to weld those together. You're going to have to hire a welder. There's so many more things that go into it than just kind of putting together a little homestead out of a container. The cheapest I've even heard anybody put one together, just the house itself, was $125,000. And if you're looking for an affordable option, the dumpster might have sounded enticing, even though I don't know how you could do that without running water or a toilet. The second option of a container home is super expensive if you don't have that kind of money on hand. And most likely, if you're going to do something like that, you're not going to get any kind of financing. You're mostly going to have to get some kind of personal loan, which has a very high interest rate. Just know that ahead of time. Also, you probably wouldn't be able to get it insured, just FYI. The guy's a genius. There's no doubt about it. But there's a girl in Atlanta that chose to make her tiny home in her own backyard in a house that she already lived in. She turned that tiny home into a space where she actually could rent it out and make a little bit of money. Precious Price is 28 years old, and she has a piece of property in Atlanta, Georgia that she bought for about $150,000. She had this humongous backyard, and during the pandemic, she thought it'd be a great idea to go ahead and rent out the bigger house and live in a tiny house in the big backyard that she already had. This idea of hers kind of came into full swing once the pandemic really started and more people are looking for places to rent. And I know from personal experience with my YouTube channel, there have been plenty of people that are looking to make extra money with their house, especially with the cost of living going up. Or they're just trying to have something for their grandma in their backyard, or for one of their kids that are off to school, off to college, but they don't want them necessarily in the house. I'm kind of that person myself. I get it. So Precious got a shed home on Home Depot and decided to turn it into a tiny home. Now, this is one of those things that a lot of people, they bite off more than they can chew. I guess that's how the expression goes. When she got it there, she had it budgeted for a certain amount of money and she had planned it all out. But as you know, with the pandemic, building material expenses had gone up exponentially. And some of her budget went a little bit higher than she necessarily wanted to. So she ended up renting out the bigger house and staying in the little house for a little while. And then she had to give up living in the bigger house to live in the littler house. So that way it could pay off the rent from that house, could pay off the little house, and back and forth. But it all worked out and it's been very profitable for her. You know, I want to add, if you're thinking about investing in tiny homes, the ones that are made from Home Depot and that you're going to turn them into a house, there's still some maintenance that needs to be done. My friend Ellen, this is her house, and there's things you have to do with paint. You have to get it up to code, and you have to get the right kind of air conditioning system for a house like this. So don't think it's just something you could just take from Home Depot, plop it in your backyard, and start renting it out. I just want to let you know that ahead of time. Now, again, if you're going to do something like this, I strongly suggest, if you're a novice and you have no idea how this works, work with a local tiny home builder in your area. The other thing I will tell you right away is find out if your area will allow you to have a tiny home structure in your backyard. Some counties will say you can have the structure in your backyard, but the electricity to the tiny home cannot be the same electricity that is to the main specific house. So you'll have to have two different lines in there. So you're going to have to budget for that. Another thing is you're maybe required to have a separate type of septic tank or some kind of water supply going to that tiny house. Not all areas are going to be like this, but you're going to want to check that out ahead of time. Another thing is if your HOA allows for rental units in your specific neighborhood. And speaking of HOAs, I know you want to groan every time I say anything about them. You're going to have that approved as well. Sometimes they'll say, yes, you can have a tiny home in your backyard, but it has to be in line with the rest of the neighborhood, meaning that the structure itself must look very similar to the houses in the neighborhood. You can't have like a solid brick house and then have a wooden tiny home behind it. Many times they're going to have to approve your tiny house itself, which sending them the complete structure and what building materials you're planning on using on your tiny home so they can approve it. Sometimes they don't care. There's plenty of them that just don't care. And if you want to do something like that, the older ones seem to not be as picky as the newer ones. If you're planning on using it as a business also, this is a little investor tip. Make sure you create a whole new business account. Go to your local accountant, set yourself an LLC, S Corp, whatever they suggest that you do in order to keep the funds from the rental separate from your personal funds. There's going to be other benefits to that as well, and your accountant can explain that to you. This is a great way to make a little extra money in an economy that is kind of suffering right now. I know all of us are a little tired of spending $8 on 12 eggs and then living in unprecedented times. I'm kind of done with it too. But this might motivate you to make a little extra money after all of this nonsense is over and start your own little business. My friend Ellen actually made this house for herself from a Home Depot shed, only paying $35,000 at the time. Granted, that was several years ago, so those prices would change today. But Danner Cronise, I hope I'm saying his last name right. He's 23 years old. He's out of Huntsville, Alabama, with a computer engineering degree and a dream of turning an old Home Depot shed into what he says is the largest tiny home ever built. So is it really a tiny house? Well, him and his dad decided they were going to go ahead and take a little bit of money and a lot of time and a lot of their skills to turn this into a livable space in their backyard. His dad had purchased the shed a long time ago and it had been overgrown with shrubs and bushes and all sorts of things. And then they took $15,000 of their own money and a lot of their own skill and turned it into a livable space. He actually documented the whole entire thing on YouTube and TikTok. You can follow him on his channel. It's this YouTube channel right here. He's got the whole thing. It's like 30 videos that shows you the entire process. So if you're thinking about doing something like this in your own backyard and you want to use your own skills, you can learn a lot from their successes and from their mistakes. Because I know I'm making a ton of mistakes. I don't even have a computer engineering degree, but I've flipped many houses and made a lot of costly mistakes. That would be a really great way for you to figure out how to do something like that, especially if you already have a structure in your backyard that you were thinking about converting. I actually even saw at Costco recently, they have really large sheds that are available that actually aren't that much money. So if you have your Costco card and you were thinking about doing something like this, maybe you should invest in going over there and get yourself a deal. I always find it inspiring when I see people take something that would normally be used just to put tools in and then turn it into a home that they can live in. Speaking of being inspired and getting really good deals, you can get a really good deal on looking on Craigslist. Daniel Salas found his in San Antonio on Craigslist. He went and visited. Matter of fact, it only cost him $1,200. The guy made a deal with him saying as long as he didn't take the shed completely apart, he would sell it to him for $1,200. The only problem that he had was come up with a way to get the shed from that location to his location. That ended up costing him $500. And then he had the big dream of bringing it to his house. And again, just like the girl that we spoke about earlier, decided to turn this into some kind of rental unit. He ends up renting it out for about $74 a night on Airbnb to give people a unique experience while visiting San Antonio, Texas. And all in all, the whole renovation cost him about $25,000 to get it all up to code with all the proper permits. So he was able to do that. Again, I'm just going to stress, if you're planning on doing something like this, make sure you follow all the rules in your specific area. Make sure you check with planning and zoning to make sure that this is something that you're allowed to do in your specific area. But if this is something something you are thinking about doing, I want to actually tell you about another YouTube channel. His name is Robuilt, and he has done this across many states. He's a friend of mine. If you're like wanting to get into the Airbnb business by using tiny homes, he's the channel to go check it out. He thinks I hate him, but I really don't. I really like the guy. Matter of fact, if you do land on one of his videos, just say Kristina Smallhorn doesn't hate you. That's what you should comment. I wonder if he'll even notice. But he has great tips when it comes to investing and making Airbnbs out of tiny homes. So definitely check him out.
You know, I always find it cool when people find ingenious ways to find an affordable place to live. I'm always confused, though, that we've gotten to this point where people have to actually turn to dumpsters in old Home Depot sheds in order to find that affordable place. But maybe that's just my bleeding heart. I don't know. You let me know in the comment section below, because I know you have an opinion about that. To watch more videos about alternative affordable housing, you're going to want to watch these videos right here. My name is Kristina Smallhorn, your real estate whisperer, and I tell you all this because good real estate information matters, even though my outfit doesn't.